and if it's already completed this year, it's charged for in this year.
Chairman, I was just going to observe that we've got some submissions on Section 36 coming up from other submitters, and I confirm Kevin's view. It's still widely misunderstood out there, and anything that can clarify it, particularly around costs, and while we can argue till the cows come home that it's good work, and I'm happy to move both of these because it's base work, it has to be done, the reality still hits them on the bottom line when the bill turns up, and they don't understand how it's made together, which is what Christine's saying too, and I agree with her. So if the decision is to go forward in the manner we're all describing, and apparently all agreed, and it shows up in your Excel spreadsheet, I notice, and exactly as you described, then we need to get out there to say what this year's bill meant and what next year's bill could mean, depending on these decisions, in real dollars. I frankly think it's a very modest amount we're talking about, but the reality is it hurts them and they feel it. So I'm happy to move both of those.
You're happy to move both of those?
Yes, because I get the clarification about Section 36 is really the key thing.
If there's no further questions, I'll accept that. Are you happy to second that? There's no further questions before we move on? Well, you've spoken. Councillor Douglas, you wish to speak? Any other speakers? Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So that's 310 and 312. Dealt with there. 339, Regional Land Research and Investigations.
So again, through you, Mr. Chair, this is a I guess a start-up area of science on the council. So land science hasn't had this level of investment for a number of years. The work that sits within the carry forward here is related to the model development, because the model that we look at, when I say the model, I'm talking about the Hiratonga model. Because we're looking at developing a model that's not dissimilar to the TRIM type model for the Tukituki River that couples land use effects on water quality. So hence we need to have an understanding of soils, soil properties, nutrient transport through soils. So this is related to that. And again, it's been a matter of having the land science capacity heavily committed into the Tukituki and simply not having the ability to get in and project manage this work. So it's proposed that this work begins. And again, this is part of the overall planning for the model development that I'm certainly happy to bring back to Council and explain, that pulls it all together into one package.
Okay, questions on that? Councillor Scott.
Same, Mr. Chairman, and I did go back to the long-term plan to check this one out, and I see that this is only part of the amount that was set aside for aerial mapping, so maybe we've done some, I don't know. But my concern, and I think this is why I'm questioning this, is the same that Councillor Dick raised earlier. We carry this work over because we didn't have time to do it this year. We already have a budget, presumably, for this work in next year. Should we just simply be looking at next year's budget and funding it out of that? And you know, are we going to find that at the end of next year we've got next year's program carried over?
Well, I haven't worked out how many million we are carrying over here. So it's a chunk of, of the whole package. Yeah.
I think your question, Councillor Scott's in the context of the total budget for the specific project. So I think, Ian, you need to answer the question: how much is the total? I mean, this has got a finite duration, this piece of work. What's the total budget, and therefore answer it in that context. If you follow me, it doesn't go on forever. This piece of work has an end. No,
and look, I don't have the total figures here in front of me for the project overall. Well, no, because incorporating the new financial year as well as the current financial year, this is kind of a discrete part of it, and it doesn't impact, or it's not something we can build into the current, in the next financial year's budget. It's a discrete package. It's a big spend because it involves a lot of external consultants to help build the model. So we can't simply try and fit it into the current financial year, into the next financial year, because we physically wouldn't have the money available to do that, as well as deliver the other projects that we have on the go. And the reason that I made the call with the team early on in the year not to embark on this work, because the point that Mr. Newman made is that if you don't have the capacity to manage it and project manage it carefully, you may as well not do it. You may as well put the money in a heap and burn it, because you won't get the outcome that you want. I wanted the team in the space where they had a clear plan, they knew what all the various moving bits were that came together. We put it into one package, we got the consultants ready to go, and what we're looking to do is run a competitive process with the consultants in terms of scoping their work and then giving us bids on the whole package. If we didn't have the space to project manage that from the get-go, we shouldn't do it, because otherwise we'd end up with a result that we just simply couldn't work with. So we've
the aerial work alone is 42,000. This coming year's aerial work is 22,000. The year after that is a further 22,000. Maybe we can get a cost saving by putting this year's and last year's together. Are we shoving the whole program back a year, or are we actually going to combine that and see that we're spending last year's money and this year's money, and therefore does it justify the carry forward? So, and the same with consultants. It's not, some of it's already been spent, but we've got another 139,000 earmarked for it this coming year and 99,000 for the following year. So I appreciate the overall budget, but I'm just wanting to know that now we're not spreading it over 3 years, or perhaps we are. Perhaps the whole thing's gone out another year. Could we do it more efficiently and more cheaply?
So the short answer is that we've basically compressed this work into a much shorter time frame. So we still need to physically cover the same, for example, for the aerial survey work, physically cover the same amount of land area that we were originally going to, and instead of spreading that over 3 years, it'll be over 2. So we'll have the plane flying for a lot more than we had in the new financial year than we had in the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With this aerial survey work, 42,000, what's the need for this that previous aerial survey work won't provide?
So this survey work goes into areas that we haven't surveyed before. So the aerial survey work the council have isn't extensive in terms of coverage in the region. So this is areas that we don't have coverage for.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just going to your point about the project design, if you like. So you do have a plan which has compressed the outputs into next year. Is that what you're saying? It's not a delay, it's a compression, and you've got a plan that reflects that.
Correct.
Is that the same? Can we rely on that observation against all these other projects where there's a carryover? And I put this in the context of, I mean, we do this every year, and are we up to the point of saying, well, actually, we need to call halt on some of these because they're simply just being pushed along at a great rate of knots and not getting anywhere. So have you got a plan?
Yes, we do have a plan, and I guess that was the point for me, or the point perhaps I didn't make particularly eloquently at the start. I wasn't being hard on the team and saying I was fascinated that, or staggered that we hadn't made progress, but it's just simply reflecting that there wasn't a project plan. So they hadn't structured what they wanted to do and how they were going to do it and who the people were going to be involved in achieving that. And that's been the reason that this thing's dragged on for as long as it has. So we've now got the discipline that says we need to understand what we need to deliver and why, being informed by the discussions that are occurring around the table in the tank process. So what's the debate or the discussion we're needing to inform? So how is science going to come along and inform that discussion? And we've taken advantage of having a reasonably productive summer to gather data to inform the model, because the models are only as good as the data that goes into them. So we've got a large body of data available. We just need to now build the platform to make sense of it.
Just you wish to follow?
Yeah, I do actually. I just think as sort of a higher level comment I'd make is that I have my own moments with some of this stuff, but the expectation the expectation, particularly driven by issues such as the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water, is that the sophistication around the the plans, the technical basis to those plans, and the ability to be able to predict and forecast effects, if you like, on water quality in particular is ratcheted up a level. Now, against that context, so this organisation's, it's fair to say, over the last 4 or 5 years, spent an awful lot more money on science than it did previously. Albeit that it did quite a bit of work, but it's just that the trend is that we're having to meet a much higher standard of forecasting and predicting impacts, particularly in the water quality sphere, I think, and so therefore this work relates to that. I think it's a management point. The point is that we're better off to, which is evident in the way that we've done the water program really, is that we're doing it on a catchment by catchment basis, sequential in terms of catchments sequentially. So you're seeing a shift of resource from that's been focused on the Toki, job is done actually, to this area here, the Hiratonga, Narururu, Turaikuri area. But again, the emphasis, I guess, Ian, is to make sure that program is compressed and delivered, isn't it? But I think that's an important bit of context here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in light of that conversation, are we at the point of saying there should not be a wish list? They should be a fully worked up proposal before they find their way into an annual plan. It occurs to me if there's not the basis to promote a project, then it shouldn't find its way in here.
Oh, look, I wouldn't disagree with that philosophy. The approach has been to try and stagger the work over a number of years to spread the load in terms of capability and resourcing, so human and financial resourcing. As Mr Newman's pointed out, that approach has shifted a little bit in terms of the catchment by catchment approach, and I personally think it's delivering a better outcome, that the team becomes fully focused in one area. Groundwater modelling is one of those sort of black arts, if you like, and in particular all of the various moving bits that fit into it aren't evident until you start building the thing, and so it can be often very difficult in advance to prescriptively lay out what it's going to look and sound like. It's kind of an iterative thing, but there's been a lot of effort going into what is the plan, what is it going to look like, getting the right people together to structure that up, and we're now in a position to say we know what that looks and sounds like. It's now the team are clear of the tuki-tuk, more or less. There's the ability to completely get the headspace into what they need to do for that catchment, the tank catchment, and get this thing built.
No carryover.
That certainly would be where I'd be starting from, and that's what I'm pushing the team very hard on.
Mr. Chairman. Well, I think possibly the question has been answered, but I'll just ask it once again in line with the queries from Councillor Curtin and Councillor Scott. If the carry forwards happen into your science section, you'll have those funds plus your budgets for the current year. Will you have the human and other resource capacity to do the work, expend the funds and get the outcomes that you require by the end of the next financial year?
Through you, Mr Chair, yes. That's the short answer. And like I'll just reiterate that I had said to the team, don't start this until we have a plan, because there is a real danger that, particularly when you're involving consultants, that you haven't got the ability to project manage carefully and closely, that it goes awry. We're not taking that approach. So it'll be a focused effort so we can closely project manage the consultant team to get the product that we need to answer the questions we know we've got.
Mr Chairman, I'm happy to move the two, 339 and 340.
Happy to move the two of them. Happy to second. Councillor McGregor, you wish to speak?
Mr Chairman, I do think this is very important work, but I think the questioning that has come from councillors is really around whether we should be adjusting the budget and pushing it out, or whether it's a true carry forward because the work is going to be done. If we're adjusting a budget, it would be able to come off our bottom line, which would be very helpful. And I guess it's up to the council through next year to monitor that the work is actually delivered. because there is an awful lot right through this program of work that wasn't able to be done because of pressure. So I do question whether perhaps we were too ambitious in the amount of work that was set, and are continuing now to try and set it within 1 year instead of over a 2-year period. But I certainly support the work and the funding of it.
Vital work, and support the resolution for it to proceed.
No other speakers? Put that motion, then all those in favour please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. We could have a bit more oomph in the eyes, would be good going forward. Right. We're going to get through a small one. They quite often take the longest. Air quality, will we have we got that?
Yes,
Mr. Maxwell?
So through you, Mr. Chair, this fortunately is a very simple one. This work is actually underway, but we're not going to be invoiced for it until the new financial year, so we need to carry those funds forward. So the work is underway and we're not paying for it until we've got what we asked for, but that won't conclude until the new financial year, so we just need to carry that small amount across and pay it in the new financial year.
Try this. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Might be pushing my luck here, but we might have a... Now let's break for morning tea, everyone, and we might be able to convene a little earlier than 10 to, depending what time our next speaker gets here, which is